been involved with Language Tree from the very beginning when it came out first. I think it's 2006, so it's quite a long time. And most of my career has been as a teacher in the classroom. But over the last 15 years or so, I've started writing school books, which I very much enjoyed. So, Leonie, do you want to say a bit about yourself?
Yes, I mean, after a short time of teaching, my career was actually in educational publishing, and I began writing for educational. Well, I began writing educational books for schools, all to do with literacy and language learning, over 20 years ago, and I'm thrilled to be working with the Caribbean because I love it so much, and I spent several years as a Caribbean publisher when I was traveling out to the Caribbean 4 or 5 times a year and spending several months a year there. So that's my background.
Yeah, I didn't mention that I actually worked in Jamaica in a school in the north part of the island called Rasis High School for 2 years, and that was my introduction to the Caribbean, and it's wonderful to have come back later in life and to be involved with it again. Well, Language Tree is now coming into its 3rd edition, and I know I speak for Leonie as well when we say that we are absolutely delighted and honoured that it's been adopted in so many of your schools, and when we come to the Caribbean we get a lot of positive comments about it. So as writers, that's a very precious thing to us. We've had the opportunity to travel to most islands. I have to say we're still waiting to go to St. Kitts and Nevis, and we've been able to meet teachers in schools and talk to you, and that's been very, very valuable because we've not only seen your teaching situation and any challenges you face as teachers, but you've had the opportunity to tell us what you would like to see in the books, and that has helped us to produce something which I think people have found useful and have enjoyed using. Now, the one thing we'd like to reassure you about is that we have continuity. In my many teaching years, I always dreaded the fact that the syllabus changed, which it did many times, of course, and we had to get used to a whole lot of new teaching methods, new materials, and so on. What you'll find is that if you have been using Language Tree before, the books have evolved. There's no rapid change. When you open the books, you're probably going to think they look pretty similar to what you've had there already. We've still got the student-focused activities, the integration of teaching, of learning skills, a wide range of texts of all sorts of, all varieties, all genres, beautifully illustrated. And a really strong point in Language Tree has been not only the structured approach to grammar, but also that we give great support to independent writing. And that is all there in the new edition. But on top of that, we've included and we've adapted so that it covers the new requirements of the new OECS syllabus, which are coming into schools now. One thing that you will find has not changed are our workbooks. They have changed at level K and grade 1, which we'll come on to later. But if you've been using the workbooks, these are unchanged and they work just as well with the new student books. Right, so I'm going to go to the first slide now, and we'll look at the specific changes. What I didn't say, I should have said first of all, is that Leonie and I are going to alternate our presentation. We'll go from one to the other, so you won't get too tired of listening to one of us all the time. And we're going to pause at the end of each section if there are any questions in the chat box. Also, if you've got anything you think you'd like to know that we're not covering, perhaps you could put that in there as well, and we'll do our best to cover it. So starting with listening, which is a key skill, we noticed in the new curriculum that there's a much greater emphasis on building up good listening skills in the students and then spinning off from that speaking activities. So you will find we've got a lot more support and practice in listening, because that is a key to children's learning. The young child will take in, first of all, will be by listening and then progressing on to reading. Another important feature for the new syllabus is giving support for Creole transition, because children come into school speaking their home language. They might not have been exposed to standard English very much before, and yet they have to transition into that. And I think that's quite a tricky thing for you to have to manage. We're doing support for that. I hasten to add, and I know Leonie's going to tell you this later, but we have had a lot of advice on this, as obviously we're not Creole speakers ourselves. Another point is a greater role for technology, which is integrated in the classroom, because that is very important to children these days. So they grow up managing to use technology instead of having to learn it the hard way, as I did later in life. Another point is encouraging the students to be more independent in their learning and to take greater responsibility for their own learning, which is done through giving them opportunities to reflect on what they've learnt, how well they did, and how they could improve next time they do it. Graphic organizers, they seem to be the flavor of the moment. People like them. You'll know the ones that are quite common ones, webs for planning and story structures. And we've also got quite a few different types of graphic organizers, which will enable the children to assess their own progress. Formative assessment, by this we mean assessing the children's progress as they go along. We've remodeled the book, so we'll see how that works. So we have more frequent opportunities for you to assess what the students are doing, what they've learnt, and how it could be improved. And finally, we include support for the CPEA. I know that quite a large number of islands. Oh, hello, Turks and Caicos. Just seen you there. I know that quite a lot of the islands are doing the CPEA, which includes things like portfolios, book reports, group projects. And this is included and covered in the new language tree. But even if you are not doing CPEA with your students, I think you'll still find that the strategies and the techniques used will be useful to you. Right, so let's move to listening. And I'm just giving you an example of a full listening exercise. But I want to say, first of all, each unit starts with either a let's talk or listen up, which is just a startup activity, which is done orally just to get the students to engage with the topic in the unit. And then you'll have the reading exercise, which is followed by a fuller speaking and listening. I'm going to go through this in some detail because I think that many of you might be looking at this on smartphones where the image might not be very big. So the teacher is provided with a text to read out to your class. And here we've got a story. This unit's all about narratives. So it's quite a well-known story, which is a local story, I think, because it's about Compere Rabbit. And he manages to play a trick on Compere Fox. After the first listening, the students are asked some true and false questions. For example, did Compere Rabbit got a thorn in his paw when he was working? Second one, Compere Rabbit wanted to find somewhere to sleep, and so on. Now, when the students have completed those exercises, they are given a graphic organizer, the one we call a fishbone, where they make notes about the story on a sort of fishbone and answer questions: who, when, how, what, where, and why. And that will structure the story for them. And after that, we ask them, point 4, to retell the story in the correct sequence, and then something to do on their own. They have to continue the story and add their own ending, because what has happened is that Compere Rabbit has managed to jump out of the world and leave Compere Fox down at the bottom. And we're not told how Compere Fox gets out. So it's up to the student to work out, how did he get out of there? They transfer that. They then work on their own to choose a story that they know well, and they can use a fishbone or a story plan to make notes about it, and then they can retell their story to another student. And as you can see from this page, this would be a very good lead into a writing exercise to write a story, having planned their story using the fishbone. Now, if you've been using the second edition of Language Tree, you'll be familiar with the teaching notes at the bottom of the page, which gives a bit of extra support and some ideas. And occasionally we have a little icon. The bottom of this one, we've got an ICT icon. And the suggestion is that you can view short movies of traditional tales on YouTube, and students can watch those and identify the story elements. Okay, I think I'm finishing there with listening, and I know that I'm going to hand over to Leonie in just a moment, but I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment, but does anybody have a question about listening and speaking, or are you going to save them up for a bit later? Okay, well, we'll move on then. The next slide.
Thank you, Julia. The next feature we're looking at is the introduction of support for transition from Creole to Standard English, which Julia's already mentioned. And it features strongly in the performance standards, which also stress that people's home language should be valued in the classroom. And we do this both via the student's text and the teacher's notes. This was, as Julia said, something of a challenge for us authors. So we had a lot of help from advisors who take a special interest in this area. And we were advised throughout by a team of teachers drawn from a number of islands. In terms of speaking in class, just as a general point, we suggest that when students are working in pairs or in groups, they're allowed to use both Standard English and their home language, whichever comes more naturally, but that when they report back to the class, they're encouraged to use Standard English as far as possible. In student books K1 and 2, Creole text is only included in the listening text. That is to say, if a story is being read or an announcement, then the dialogue may be in Creole. But we don't put Creole text on the student's page in those early years. And this is so that when they're at the early stages of learning to read, students aren't distracted from the spelling patterns and grammar of Standard English. The page we're looking at now comes from Student Book 1. And at the top of the page, there's a simple conversation in Standard English. It's modeled using speech bubbles. There's a girl and a boy, and the girl says, "Hello, my name is Sal. What's your name?" Boy says, "My name is Josh." And she replies, "I'm 6. How old are you?" The teacher's notes, which are flagged up here by a red CR icon, which shows where we offer advice on transition from Creole to Standard English, offers this advice. Allow pupils to ask and answer these questions in Creole, then model the conversation with a pupil in Standard English. Pupils then work in pairs using Standard English forms. So first, there's pair work in the home language, followed by teacher modelling in Standard English, and finally student practice in Standard English. Beyond Students Book 3, we have texts in Creole on the student's page. And this page contains a short poem from Student Book 4, which includes dialect. And I'm afraid I'm not going to read it out because I wouldn't do it justice. And which ties into the theme of the unit, which is hurricanes. The dialect in the poem also includes phrases which, if the poem were written in Standard English, would be in the present continuous. And these link directly to the grammar section of the unit, which focuses on present continuous, which is just a few pages further on. And here there's a Creole poem from Students Book 6, and it's called Baby K Rap Rhyme, which treats the very serious issue of environmental destruction via a rap written in dialect. It's a great rap. It's not depressing, but it's serious, and yet it's written in a very light way. And at the top of the page here, we've got a section called Listen Up. Many of the units begin with that, which refer you, the teacher, to the listening text at the back of the book. And the first couple of verses are, in fact, in the listening text. So the teacher uses them as a listening exercise, reading the first few verses aloud, and then asking a few questions. The students then are asked, who is the speaker? Who is in Baby K's family? What's the mood of these verses? What do you think the rest of the poem will be about? Before moving on to the written text. Another change Julia introduced was the integration of technology. And there are many, many opportunities for integrating technology throughout the books. We offer suggestions in the teacher's notes for using videos, sound recordings, and computer graphics, as well as word processing and internet research. Students are also regularly encouraged to think of ways of using digital media to enhance the presentation of their work. Again, with the technology, suggestions are in the teacher's notes at the bottom of the page, where they're flagged up by the ICT icon that Julia's mentioned. And I'm just going to read a few examples of teacher's notes. First, show a YouTube video of a traditional tale and compare it with the version students just read. And show a documentary about the topic about which students have studied. Pause regularly and ask pupils to summarize what they've seen and learnt. And finally, here's another one. Use a phone to record some of the pupils reciting poems. Make audio recordings of some of the raps they have written. In each case, ask pupils to watch and criticize their own performance. So you can see that we're using it when dealing with any type of writing, different types of writing. The suggestions for the student directly appear in tablet icons like those you see on the screen at the moment. And these are examples from Students' Book 4 and Students' Book 6. The first, I'll read them aloud in case you can't read them on your device. Type your poem, change words and move them about, experiment with different fonts. That's obviously when they've been poetry writing. And the other one from Student Book 6 says, collaborate with other students by sharing your work electronically. So this is in the context of group work where they're going to be collaborating with their classmates. So, and I think I'm handing over to you now, Julia.
Yes, I have noticed in the comment here, I don't know if anything can be done about it, that would be up to Elliot, that somebody's asking, could we zoom the PowerPoint and the share screen some more? I don't know if that's going to be possible. Yes, I tried that. This one is a good one anyway, because I've taken part of a page. So, but let's see how we go on the next one. Right. I'm going to look, first of all, about how we've introduced student reflection on student learning. And one of the main ways of doing this, and we did find from touring, going around Caribbean schools, that many of you are actually already doing this, is encouraging students to keep a journal to record experiences and thoughts and to reflect on what they've learnt in class. So it's not just writing a diary about what's happened, it's reflections, points of learning, and we put some suggestions here. This is at grade 5. Your journal can include reports on your daily activities and on special events, notes about stories and books you read, reflections about your schoolwork and how you could improve, important achievements, for example, being selected for a school team. And then we've asked them here to create the first entry in their journal. And this suggests they should write study advice in the listening exercise for this unit. the discussion was about preparing good advice for student learning, and it could be recorded in the journal. You will see I'm going to come on now to some graphic organizers. We have put the graphic organizers at the back of the book because there are a lot of them, and we felt that putting them all in the units would take up too much space. Now, these graphic organizers are specifically to do with student reflection, and they are called self-assessment. One of them is something the students can complete at the end of the unit, and this could indeed be included in their journal. And they're asked to say what I did well, what I learnt in this unit, what I most enjoyed, what was difficult, what I need to get better at. And then to reflect on a specific skill, we've got a table about speaking, and we asked the students to say things like, I looked at the audience, I made sure people could hear me, I made my voice interesting, I spoke clearly, not too fast or too slow. And at the top, they've got criteria. They can either say always, most of the time, sometimes. We didn't include the option of never because we assumed that they would do some of these things sometimes at least. And the last question is, what could I do better next time? And there's a reading response after reading text. They're asked to give the title, the text type, topic and the theme, the main ideas. And this is an interesting one, how it relates to me. So we get them to make the text to self-connection here, to engage them with the text. What I learnt, new words. Well, this might be a bit ambitious, so you probably got to specify 4 new words or something like that. Otherwise, they could go on forever. And my opinion of the text. And the final graphic organizer here is to help them with doing their book report. So we're coming on to those a bit later. And this is a book report giving the title, the author's name, the setting, the plot, the main character, other characters, and finally their personal response. So this is a very good way of structuring their thoughts in the book report. Right, now we're going to talk about the graphic organizers. As I mentioned earlier on, there are other graphic organizers in the terms of webs and other things that you're familiar with, I'm sure, story plans. We already saw a fishbone. Now, at the end of each unit, we provide the option, we provide a page which assesses what the students have done in that unit. Now, the current edition, we have a summative assessment because at the end of every 6 units, we've got a review unit. Now we've changed this, so it's a quick update at the end of each unit that you can see quickly. The students can do this, the teacher can see quickly what they've absorbed and what still needs to be done, and the students also can see what they've learnt. So this is a level grade 3, and very straightforward. I'll just read at least some of it. Make 3 or more questions to ask a new student who has joined your class. That's the first exercise. And this unit was about question words. So what is your name, for example? Exercise 2, ask students to find 3 verbs in these sentences because the verbs were covered in as a part of speech in this unit. And then exercise 3, you've got to choose the correct verb forms. So it's a subject-verb agreement exercise. The first one, for example, is we all loves or love playing sports. Now, question 4 is a vocabulary exercise. We hope they can use a bit of context to work this out. The first one, anybody from Grenada with us tonight? Because the first one is Kirani James is a champion sprinter. And the options are A, a driver. I know you do have a champion driver who comes from Grenada. Or is he a runner or is he a singer? And I'm reliably informed that Kirani James is a sprinter. And then at the end, a more open-ended exercise, write a question for each of these words. When, where, who. Now, we did have a question, interesting question this morning, because we've done this already today, and that was how often should you do the formative assessment? The answer is that we provide a formative assessment at the end of each unit. But in fact, you are conducting formative assessment every time you're in a classroom with students. Every time you teach them something, you're assessing how well they've absorbed it. So it really is going on all the time. But this is an opportunity just to pin it down a little bit. And a similar one at grade 5. I probably won't go through this in too much detail, but you can see straight, look at the page, there's more there. This one has actually got a listening exercise to start off with, which the teacher would read, and it's a description. The students have to write 2 items of observe with each of the senses, sight, hearing, and smell. So that links up. Then we've got exercise 2 is a vocabulary exercise. Exercise 3, 4, 5, and 6 are really all about the present and past continuous tense, which they've been learning in the unit. And then they've got a picture. They have to say what is happening in the picture. And I know it's very small, but down in the bottom left of the picture, you can see 2 children who are eating ice cream. A dog is eating a bone. A man is carrying bags, so they can work on that. And finally, you've got a exercise adding prefixes to honest, patient, sure, and so on, to honest, dishonest, patient, impatient, and so on. So it's a very straightforward exercise. These are can-do skills, which are highly prized in the new syllabus because they are things that they can do. Right, so moving on from that. Now I'd like to look at some of the CPEA specific types of exercise we've got in the books. This is already at grade 3. It's a long way off CPEA, but we introduced the skill early. A book report, and this is based on a chapter where you've got a very well-known story where it's a Nancy manages to get the stories from Tiger. I'm sure you all know that one. So we give them an example to start off with, a table there, the title, read the notes, the notes the student could write for a review, the title, Anansi stories, the setting and characters, the forest, a long time ago, Anansi, tiger, and snake. The main idea, Anansi gets the stories for himself. The best part, this is the student opinion, when Anansi tricked Snake. And why I liked it, Anansi is very clever. And you will find at the back of the book, we've got a sample book report you can look at with the students for them to see. We thought if we put it in the main part of the book, they would just copy it. So it's better to have it at the end. And then they're asked to choose another story and make notes for a book report on that, following the pattern they've got above. Another key part of the CPEA assessment is to create a writing portfolio. This is in the book, in the student book 5, sorry, but we recommend that the students start to collect things for their portfolio from grade 5 onwards. I believe that you're already doing that. And the portfolio would contain samples of different types of writing. And then when they come to the end of the course, the students, with your help, can make a final selection. And we've given examples, types of writing tasks you could include. Stories, reports of events, friendly letters, speeches, poems, biographies and autobiographies, newspaper articles, formal letters, information texts, notices and advertisements. And they'll practice all these skills in both student book 5 and student book 6. And we suggest that they write a short reflection on each piece of work that they place in the portfolio. And that's how they can use the table that I showed you earlier on. They can include that at the end of their written piece. Another important part of the CPEA is a group project. This was at level student book 5, but I know they've got projects also in book 6. And the suggestion here is very much based on what was in the units. Students, we work in groups to plan a class activity which helps to protect the environment. What I didn't say at the beginning is that we have refreshed some of the activities and themes in the book, and you will find that the environment is of such crucial importance at the moment that is covered in every level. And we give them some suggestions for their project in point 1, is decide what the purpose of the activity will be. With some suggestions, they don't have to take those, but get started. A clean-up day at school, beach clean-up, create a school garden, planting trees. And then we get them together to do planning using the web activity. And they get together to prepare a project plan. And you'll see that we've got the tablet icon on the right, which says type your project plan so it looks professional. I've had a request. Can we zoom it? I can see a request just popped up. Is that possible? Mr. Technology. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so we're looking now at preparing the project plan, and we've said to use the notes you made in the web to help you write the plan. And when you plan a class activity, you must show your plans to your teacher, and if it involves the whole school, you have to ask the principal for permission. Point 4, we're getting them to make a task list, and each group member selects a task. So I'm sure you're aware of this. You've had it in classes. You have to get students to volunteer for tasks, and they've got to agree what they're going to do, which is quite a skill, really. Point 5, they prepare publicity, and they have fun preparing leaflets, posters. They can give a short presentation. And finally, the final point there is to collect all the material prepared for the project in a folder and submit it to the teacher. I think that's bringing me to the end of, or maybe there's one more. I can't see what the next slide is going to be, so it might be one for Leonie.
Yeah, I think it's mine.
It's you. Yeah. Yes, I don't see any questions as yet. Is there anything? We haven't seen anything. So everybody's happy, saving them for the end. Okay.
Thank you, Julia. So Julia mentioned that we talked to a lot of teachers before we began preparing this edition. And in response to what we were told, and in addition to the changes we've already mentioned, we've made significant changes to grades K and 6. And we'll begin by looking at grade K students' book. So grade K now has its own scope and sequence chart. And this, as you can see here, it's unit by unit. And then the columns, it makes clear the expanded coverage of listening, speaking, reading, viewing, and writing. And this will help you enormously with your planning, I'm sure. A lot of the material will be familiar, although it has been reordered, as the units are now grouped according to the type of writing. Unit 4 is the only new unit in this book, and as you can see, it features environmental print. I read aloud from the teacher's notes to give you an idea of the suggestions we make. But first of all, as you can, I hope you can see, but in case you can't, it says, where do we see these signs? What do they tell us? And there are traffic lights with apparently stationary traffic, and circles, one with a dog in it and a red line slashed through, no dogs, one with a drink and a sandwich and a slash through it, no eating or drinking, and the other one is a triangle advising you that there are people at work in the road, and then there's an open and a push sign on a shop door. So yes, I've got here. I'll read from the sign, the teacher's notes. Look together for signs, notices, and labels in the classroom and school. Ask pupils what their purpose is and how they're different from stories and poems. So even before they read the page, we're suggesting that teachers go out around the school with the children, or just looking around the classroom, looking for these types of reading in real life. The next teacher's note is point to each sign on the page and ask pupils to tell you what it means and why it's important. Tell pupils that the bottom photograph shows part of the doors into a store. Sorry, that was just an explanatory thing. Make sure there are plenty of signs and labels displayed in the classroom. Ask pupils to suggest and make new ones for specific purposes. And then finally, take pupils on a walk in the local environment to identify symbols or take photos to show them, including familiar shop signs and brands. So it's giving a context for the work that they're doing. The next new feature of Grade K is the activity pages. Julie's already said there are new activity pages at the end of each unit in the other levels. In Grade K, there are 7 altogether, coming after every 2 or 3 units. We thought it would be overkill to do it after, sometimes a 1-page or a 2-page unit. Each one revisits skills that have been introduced or practiced in the previous units. The purpose of these pages that we're looking at, it focuses on spelling. Sorry, it focuses on rhyme. But the overall purpose is to give teachers material to use for formative assessment, as Julia had mentioned. And it also enables students to begin the process of reflecting on their learning, because they're looking at what they've achieved, what they can do, and where they may find difficulty. This one focuses on rhyme, and first they identify the rhyme orally. They look at the pictures. There's a picture in the first one. It says, say the words, which words rhyme. There's a picture of a cat and a pot and a bat. And by saying them aloud, they're listening for the rhyme. The second line is a dog, a frog, and a leg. And the third is a crab, a tree, and a bee. The second activity asks them to read sentences. And the question is, which 2 words rhyme in each sentence? So here they're going to be identifying spelling patterns. The frog sat on the log, and which words rhyme? The vet will see my pet. I like the red bike. And finally, the third activity is slightly different, but obviously sight words appear in all units, and it's asking them to match the word in bold on the left with the same word in the list on the right. So the first one is come, and the words next to it are cat, home, come. And the next one is go, and the third is you. So that's an activity on sight vocabulary, the words which are very common, but which can't be decoded fontly. Actually, I won't move on to that yet. There's no slide for the section I'm going to talk about now, as the support for, this is writing, but the support for writing in Grade K is all in the teacher's notes. We've introduced a lot more independent writing into Grade K, as well as activities. There's advice on responding to students' first attempts at writing independently. In the previous edition, all the writing at level K was in the workbook and constituted mostly of letter formation and short responses. The new performance standards require students to also be free to get their ideas and stories down on paper in whatever way they're able to. This may be drawing a picture or dictating sentences by attempting writing themselves, or it can be done through shared writing. And here are a few examples from relevant teachers' notes in Grade K. Ask pupils to recount what they usually do after school. Ask them to draw a picture of one event and to dictate or write a caption. Praise attempts at writing. Look for symbols that resemble letters. Ask them to read their own writing. And another one from a different page. The class retelling, so they've been reading a story and now they retell it. The class retelling could be a shared writing activity. Think aloud as you write to demonstrate how you consider different options. So that's asking them, the teacher, to, as she writes on the board, her ideas and those of the children, the words that are writing, to think aloud and say, well, which word shall I use here? Or can I think of another? I can't think of another word for big. Can you help me? So shared writing is referred to quite often as being an important strategy. And the only other thing to say about Students' Book K is that it also has listening texts at the back, and that these include extended read aloud versions of all of the stories, some of which contain dialogue in Creole. As I said, there'll be no Creole on the page at this level. Now I'm moving on to Grade K workbook, which has been revised in 2 ways. Firstly, the order in which the letter sounds are introduced has been changed. Sounds are now introduced in the same order as in Jolly Phonics, a phonics program which is very widely used. The previous order was based on letter formation, and it's now based on letter sounds, which ties in with the OECS emphasis on speaking and listening. The second change is that we've also added an 8-page writing section to get students writing independently, as I was describing earlier. Advice on responding to students' attempts to writing are also included at the bottom of the page in these workbook pages. I should say here that there is also an 8-page writing section added to the new edition of Workbook 1. So there is an emphasis in the syllabus on emergent writing, and in Grade K, students are encouraged to record their ideas according to their abilities. And this is just one example. On this page, students are given a situation. As you can see, Nancy has, or maybe you can't see, sorry. Nancy has turned up at the front door. He's raising his hat. He looks very jolly. And a boy and a girl have opened the door. And they're asked, what happened next? Draw and write. Obviously, they won't be able to draw on the workbook page, but they can do that in their own paper or exercise books. And the teacher's notes for this read, begin by working orally, ask pupils to describe what happened, ask how the characters felt and what they said, encourage creative writing, allow pupils to record their ideas according to their ability. If they're still emergent writers, look out for an understanding of which letters represent certain sounds. Encourage pupils to leave space between letters and between word clusters. So now I'm moving on to Grade 6. And Grade 6 includes all of the main changes that Julia and I have talked about, including the graphic organisers, and has also been revised to be more exam focused. It's quite a big change because the book now comprises 12 units, which is down from 18 in the second edition. The reason for this is that we were told by many teachers that they weren't able to complete all the units because of the time they spend preparing for exams. So, however, although there are fewer units, we haven't lost any of the skills coverage because the book now begins with a 16-page review section. And this revises all the basic language skills taught in previous levels, such as grammar, punctuation, sentence structure. The review section also recaps the skills that are necessary for CPEA and other primary leaving exams. And this is one of the pages on study skills, and it's looking at a book report. I'm just keeping my eye on the time. And it's supporting the writing of these reports in the same way Julia was describing earlier. So students, again, they're referred to the sample book report in the appendix of sample texts at the end of the book. So it begins when you write a report or a book or of a book or story you've read. Remember to say why you chose the book, to summarize the content. If it's a story, describe the characters, state your personal response, provide reasons or evidence to support your views. And the teacher's notes on this page, and they've also got a graphic organizer to help them. The teacher's notes suggest helping students to select suitable books for their book reports, encouraging them to form book groups to discuss the books they read. So there are different suggestions for things to do outside the text on the page in the student's book, but you don't have to do them, but they're there, and we hope you'll find them helpful. There's a lot of project work in the new edition, and students are taken through the stages of planning, researching, and producing a group project, as well as discussing how to work successfully as a group. It actually comes from the review section at the beginning, which is a sort of summing up, a reminding of what they've been told, in previous years. And it gives the stages of, on the left, it's giving the stages through which they'll have to go. And there's a suggestion for typing your section of the project, sharing it digitally with your group, and collating everybody's work in one file. That's in the tablet icon. And it also reminds them that a successful group project depends on working well together, doing effective research, and having good presentation skills. In the second half of this page, they work together, agreeing group talk rules, which will help you to work together successfully. Discuss the last time you talked in a group, what worked well, what went wrong. Work in a group. Which of these guidelines should you follow and why? Everyone should be given a chance to talk. No one can change their mind. That doesn't sound like a good one. Talk as loud as you can, or that. Listen and think about everyone's ideas. Look at and listen to the speaker. Try to get your own way. Anyway, and there are several more of those. And this should generate discussion of how you make group, how you can work well together as a group. And they're asked to think of any more rules of their own. And the teacher, it's suggested that the teacher, with the class, actually create a poster of agreed rules going forward, which they can put on the wall. And the last page I'm looking at here is about portfolio and journals, which they're two other important requirements for CPEA. And Students' Book 6 helps students to reflect on the work they include in the portfolio, while also suggesting topics to write about in their journals. And I think probably we ought to open up. Do you want to, can I go on for a couple of minutes, or shall I stop to ask for questions?
We've got about 8 minutes left, so there would be time for you to, unless there's, I don't think we've got any questions. I don't know if Elliot has a question, because he did before.
Oh, one thing I meant to say is people were asking to zoom the page. If you can't read it, I believe, and Elliot, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you will be able to access this webinar on the Macmillan YouTube channel, so you will be able to watch it again.
Yeah, we've got a note from Elliot saying that the presentation will be sent to you afterwards.
Oh, right, good.
So that is coming. I think maybe it's worth making a comment about when the books are likely to appear, because I think I can see Elliot about to come back in again. He might be able to tell us.
Yeah, so oh, you can't see me.
Got you now.
Bye.
So yeah, so just to add to those points, the presentation will be sent to everyone along with the certificate, and then we do load the whole presentation onto YouTube as well. So a recording of this whole webinar and all our other webinars are on our YouTube channel. And yeah, in terms of the books, they are printing at the moment. We're expecting them to be ready in the UK at the end of November. So hopefully you should be seeing them, if not the end of this year, then certainly the start of 2022. Hope so. So you've got that to look forward to for the new year.
Yeah, there's a couple of other points that I think already on the market. We do have a CPEA guide, and that is in the 4 subjects as language, maths, science, and social studies. And that really is, it's got some question papers, plus it's got lots of practice exercises and tips for learning. So those are available. We didn't mention that we have in student book 5 and 6, we've got some practice tests which are suitable for the CPEA exam or yeah, I see. I'm just popping that. I see the questions, but that's my next thing I'm going to say. The question has just popped up. You will find that we have got tests which will prepare for any primary leaving certificate in the student books. We have in the past had teachers' books. There's been a problem with them because they've not been available in many schools and people have never seen them. So in the 2nd edition, we prepared some online resources and we also had teachers' notes on the page. So we will be providing teachers' resources. Some we'll be working on them at some future point. And I think if there's something you particularly would like to have in those resources or anything you particularly need, it would be a very good idea to let us know that so we can try and include it.
Yeah, so we will have, we'll be loading, there are already on our website teacher resources and teacher guides. And then, so for the new edition as well, when that's released, we should have resources, and you can email us to inquire about that, or you can look on our website and try to find them for yourself. But sometimes it can be difficult to find things on there. So if you can't find anything, you can reach out to us on any of the email or social media that are on the screen at the moment. So I've not seen any other questions, but if anyone does have any questions, feel free to write them out now about any of the presentation or anything else, and we'll try to answer in the last few minutes.
Yeah, was there anything you would have liked us to cover in the presentation that we didn't? I mean, we'd said quite a lot, but maybe there was something else you'd have liked to hear.
So you talked a lot about how technology integrates into the new so in the new edition. But is it do you always need to use the technology, or do they work? Does it work equally as well without?
Yeah, I'll answer that. It does work equally as well without. So they're there as suggestions, but if the children don't have access to the technology, you can still teach the unit the text successfully without. So they're optional. It's an optional extra.
There are plenty of references to technology in the curriculum, yes. So we have included them. Some of the ideas I think could be difficult to include at the moment, but if these books have a 10-year life or longer, which we hope they will, as the previous editions have done, then things are going to change. So we've got to be looking towards what might be available in 5 years from now.
And we also, as I mentioned, do include using phones, to make video recordings, for example, or to record their reading aloud, and so there are some other ways that it can be done.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thanks for answering that. And then, can teachers set homework easily from the book for the kids to take home with them and do independently? So I know there's a lot of teacher notes, but does it work for sort of independent study in that way?
I think that to the stage primary level, most of it will be teacher led in the first instance, and the students will an exercise that's been prepared in class orally can go for a homework. There will also be students who will engage in research, which is going to have to be done independently. And of course, the workbooks are a great backup that can be used to support points made in the in the classroom, and that can be done independently.
Great, thanks, Julia. Well, I think we're just about at the end. So if there's no more questions from anyone, then I've just got to say thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Leonie and Julia, for another great presentation this evening or this afternoon. Yeah, so do feel free to reach out to us on any of the contacts you can see on your screen at the moment, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Ours is coming to an end.
Okay, I'll shut this off now. Thanks everyone, and goodbye.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Bye.